Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. I want to welcome you to the Tech Ranch Venture Outfitter. I am Kevin Cohen, the founder of Tech Ranch, and real excited about being connected with you, and also kind of sad for the topic we're going to talk about today is the tragedy that just happened a couple days ago in Texas. But I want to make sure that we frame this in with how do we as entrepreneurs are typically the people who take action the fastest. And so part of today's topic is going to be about how is it that we can organize to taking action because there's some tragic events that continue to happen. We want to do something about this. We want to actually take action around this. And because this community is so focused on that, I decided that for today's topic, even though this wasn't originally what we had planned, that we would go ahead and actually engage in conversation around this. Let me just hop into some of the slides to get through some of the pieces that we want to get through. But today is about the tragedy in Texas. So welcome to the Venture Outfitter. Thank you to DualWorks for being the Tech Ranch's home. And if you're looking for, they're our sponsor. They've been a really valuable sponsor that we've been working with for years. Linda Blackman, the woman who started DualWorks, is a long-term Tech Rancher. Thank you to her. We're just about to be launching other sponsorship positions, so you'll be hearing more about that. If you have a company that you would like to make sure gets the visibility across the Tech Ranch community, we're going to formalize a lot more of this sort of stuff. But thank you for Linda and her team making it possible or stepping in to being our first sponsor for the VO Weekly program. A lot of times I do a lot of announcements and merchandising and stuff like that. I want to make sure that we simplify things. If you're not on our email list, if you're not on our country manager list, if you're not, not listed as a mentor and you want to be, if you're any of those different things, if you want to get into the community, to get involved in our community, you don't have to do anything other than declare yourself an entrepreneur and show up. There's not a charge for the entry part. There's all sorts of other things that we'll offer to you on top of that, but best place to go if you need to get involved and you're not necessarily on our radar yet is to go to this contact us form or to go to this connection web part of our website. So take advantage of that. There's a lot more information that's going to start coming out in our website, but I wanted to make sure I simplified things to say, hey, this is the place to engage. And coming soon, one of our historic long-term instructors, her name is Maura Neville Thomas. I've known her for, I don't know, probably 15 to 20 years now because of the work that she's been doing. She's been doing work in productivity for a very long time, and she's a world-level expert. I just recently said, hey, Maura, those programs that you used to run, and I think it was almost like a decade ago when we really did a lot of things with her, I benefited from that, and so I've asked her to come back and say, hey, give us an update about what you're working on. That'll be next week, June 2nd, 11 a.m. Central Time. I want to make sure that we really promote this because Maura has a lot of insight and has been an entrepreneur that helped a bunch of us that were bootstrapping our businesses up. So take advantage of this. The time will be well spent. She'll point to some of the free resources that she has as well as a bunch of other trainings and things like that. So that's next week. Again, if you want details of the program, always you can find them at techranch.com/events. And this will be next week, and we'll have several other things after that. I'll get Jello in a little bit to tell us the other things that are coming. But part of what we want to make sure is start taking advantage of the experts we're going to be bringing in. We'll start producing those type of programs. We've had some that have been more in response to world events, but I want to start getting these kind of insight to you guys as soon as possible. And because part of what we're here to do today is to talk about the tragedy that happened in Texas. If you hadn't heard, 19 kids, 2 adults were slaughtered a few days ago. An 18-year-old bought a couple of weapons, bought a couple of AR-15s, and it's my understanding made some announcements, shot his grandmother, then drove to an elementary school, engaged with police before he went in to do what he did, was in there more than an hour without having police engaging him, and killed 19 kids and 2 adults. Why do I think it's appropriate to talk about this sort of stuff during a VO Weekly? I seriously state a lot of times that all the world's problems have already been solved, but here we are in the most powerful nation in the world, but we can't protect our kids, and we're not protecting our kids. And so I want to talk about this because entrepreneurs are people who take action, and entrepreneurs are responsible for being the culture shapers, right? We shape culture. There is no separation of being a technology entrepreneur without having some notion of morality, right? The worst examples right now of entrepreneurs that don't have morality as part of what they're up to, and they don't have ethics, or ethics that are, I don't know, I'm going to say good ethics, because they might have an ethic, they might just have, their ethic might be kind of weird or something like that, or distraught, but there is no separation of technology from morality. There is no separation from entrepreneurship as culture builders from what's happening in the world. I kind of want to talk about that. And what's interesting about this is we have some leaders. In this case, I'm going to share with you the Golden State Warrior coach Steve Kerr reacting to the shooting. I was going to say I was happy, but that's not the right word. I was moved that someone else is actually standing up and saying, "Hey, wait, no more," because I think it's been enough for the type of tragedies without taking any action. And so I'm going to play this just because I think it's important to actually share his words, because I echo these words. But let me, he said them very elegantly. Let me share this.
I'm not going to talk about basketball. Nothing's happened with our team in the last 6 hours. We're going to start the same way tonight. Any basketball questions don't matter. Since we left shoot-around, 14 children were killed 400 miles from here, and a teacher. And in the last 10 days, we've had elderly black people killed in a supermarket in Buffalo. We've had Asian churchgoers killed in Southern California, and now we have children murdered at school. When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. I'm so tired of I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough. There's 50 senators right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power. So I ask you, Mitch McConnell, I ask all of you senators who refuse to do anything about the violence and school shootings and supermarket shootings, I ask you, are you going to put your own desire for power ahead of the lives of our children and our elderly and our churchgoers? Because that's what it looks like. It's what we do every week. So I'm fed up. I've had enough. We're going to play the game tonight, but I want every person here, every person listening to this, to think about your own child or grandchild or mother or father or sister, brother. How would you feel if this happened to you today? We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence. Yeah, go Dubs, you know. Come on, Mavs, let's go. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go play a basketball game. And 50 senators in Washington are going to hold us hostage. Do you realize that 90% of Americans, regardless of political party, want background check, universal background check. 90% of us, we are being held hostage by 50 senators in Washington who refuse to even put it to a vote, despite what we, the American people, want. They won't vote on it because they want to hold on to their own power. It's pathetic. I've had enough.
That was Steve Kerr. It's interesting because I think that we're now seeing this type of something's different about this most recent tragedy. Or it's not that it's different, it's just that it's just gotten to be so much with all the carnage that's happened. As an example, the teacher, this is a little bit of information about the teacher, the first teacher that was killed. At the end, there were actually 5 more kids after that video interview that we just saw from Steve Kerr that were killed. This is the first teacher that was killed. There's been some memes that I think are really appropriate for this. And the reason I'm sharing the memes, why share the memes? I have an opinion about what I think should happen, but the thing that I actually want to say is what's weird and what I don't understand about the politicians and what Coach Steve was actually talking about is the fact that there's not been any action. It's like the action hasn't happened, and so there is something deeply hypocritical about praying for a problem you're unwilling to resolve. One of my favorite sayings, African proverbs, is, if you want God to listen to your prayers, move your feet. It's one of my favorite proverbs ever, and when I saw this from Miroslav Volf, I thought that it was interesting as well. And the thing about it is the fact that we have more children dying than we have soldiers dying. The meme on the right says, "Let's take a moment to honor the sacrifice of our brave school children who laid down their lives to protect our rights to bear arms." It's odd to think that more kids have gotten slaughtered than we've had soldiers that have lost their lives in recent years. And so there is now a list on Wikipedia of more than 212 schools that have had people die in, where there's been attacks. This is the second page. This is the third page. This is the fourth page. That's available. That list is available on Wikipedia. And so the question, I think that at this point, when trying to answer this question of what to do, there's some stuff that I want to be more visible about what I'm going to do and actions I'm going to take. But I kind of think that there's a way that the community, because we are an active community, we're not a large community, but we're a worldwide community, and we take action. We take action together, and we help each other. Like part of the whole idea about the Venture Outfitter is that, each one of the entrepreneurs that I know that are in the Venture Outfitter, that are, Tech Ranch entrepreneurs, each one that have actually stuck around for a long time, are pioneers that are taking on crap that needs to be dealt with. And so this is another thing that I want to make sure, and I also want to make a call out to if you know of entrepreneurs that are more directly addressing it, and those entrepreneurs can also be at nonprofits and things like that. We should do some stuff about that. Now, in my life, one of the interesting things about answering this question was last Friday, I met His Holiness Sri Ravi Grander. They call him Guru Dev. I'm Christian. I was honored to be invited in a very small gathering of business leaders. There was a really large, thousands of people event in the evening, but in the afternoon there was a very small event. And one of the things that even though I come from a different religious background, one of the things that I see myself, I've been doing meditation since 1999, right? Part of what I want to make sure that we start bringing in is I think there are practices that can help us as entrepreneurs get through the day and stuff like that. And perhaps as culture builders, as entrepreneurs there are things that we need to do. I also think that this is time that because the politicians, at least in my local area, aren't taking action. Because they aren't taking action, I think it's finally time that I'm going to have to get involved politically, which I always have loved being a moderate, but I don't see a way of being a moderate with the lack of action. It doesn't make sense. I've always been what I call a GDI, goddamn independent, and I don't think that I can be. And what I want to do is I want to open up things for discussion. Now, before I forget, Kim Johnson, before the show started, mentioned the following thing, that here in Austin, there's going to be an interfaith vigil for Uvalde and Buffalo, an urgent call for love and action. That is tonight, 7:30 to 9 at Weberville. I'm actually supposed to be out of town by this time, so I don't know that I'll personally get to go there. Maybe I just found out about this, so I might be changing my plans. Kim, do you want to say anything more about this?
Sure. This is organized by the IACT of Austin, Interfaith Action of Central Texas, which is broadly based faith denominations. The Hope Awards winners this last year were Shalom Austin, Dr. Gunnar Aslan, who's Muslim, and St. Stephen's Episcopal School. So this is a very broad-based group. The purpose tonight is going to be live streamed also. The purpose tonight is to commission people who want to do everything from go to Houston to demonstrate at the NRA convention to write letters to their congressmen. And I think the point of this, it will be live streamed if somebody just wants to engage that way. They do have limited space. They ask for you to RSVP if you're going to go. The point of this is people have their own capabilities, people have their own means, and it's a community of multiple faiths that is going to just help people find collaborative groups to take the action that they can and want to do in response to this issue. So find your place, find your call to action, and potentially get some support for other people doing the same things. Not everybody can go down to Houston to the NRA convention. Not everybody can, donate blood in Uvalde, but it's a commissioning ceremony to try to help people find their own mission of what to do.
Understood. I think that with the live stream, I'll definitely join. Hey, Jello, if you can, please get the information from Kim, and let's go ahead and get that posted onto the Tech Ranch calendar. And let's do that as soon as possible so we can share it more, the information that's in the email. Because, things need to be done about this. And so the thing that I actually want to do now is I want to explore with the studio audience that we have here. It's interesting, being in the United States, most powerful nation on the earth, that this sort of crap doesn't happen in other, developed nations like it does here. In fact, in a lot of the undeveloped nations, or the nations that are developing, it's really weird that even where you would expect to be more violence, there's not as much violence as there is here. And so we actually have, let's see, everywhere from the Czech Republic, Russia, we have Washington State, Mexico, 2 different sites in Mexico. We have our Canadian that lives in the United States who works in New Zealand represented. We have Nigeria. We have a bunch of different points of view, even in our small audience. And I want to make sure that we're paying attention to what's being said in our LinkedIn comments as well. But I'm just wondering, does anyone want to lead with some thoughts about this? I'm open to. I love our organic nature because sometimes we discover things in these times together.
I'll start. So ever since I was in junior high and having to learn the U.S. Constitution and studying for the citizenship exam, I always wondered as far as about the Second Amendment. I find it completely idiotic that instead of actually learning the history, where it stems from, the reason it was included in the Constitution was to protect the people when the British were trying to take over the land. Having all of that and totally disregarding the technology, the advancements of society, somehow trying to justify, nobody's claiming anybody's coming in and taking guns. And it is such a valid question to me. How the hell is it that there's countries all over the world that somehow are totally understanding that guns are not supposed to be something you just play with? On that, I mean, sure, as kids, you know, you play around with that as far as toys, but in real life situation scenarios, it's not a joke. I don't understand how other countries have more common sense, and US somehow has this constant argument that people are trying to take your guns. And then on top of that, the other main point is there's that many parents that, to me, we all make mistakes, but I'm sorry, how the hell is it that you have a 2 or 3-year-old and you have a gun that's just laying by a couch in the living room? What do you think is going to happen? To me, that is complete nonsense as well. So those are my starting points.
Understood. Thank you, Paulina. Yeah, no, I think it's quite interesting that 40% of the world's guns are actually owned in the United States. 40%. It speaks to, and I'm not against gun ownership, by the way. I own guns. I grew up with guns. I grew up learning to hunt. I grew up, and there's part of me that when I see the events of what's happening in Russia, I mean in Ukraine because of Russia, I'm like, you know, there's something about being able to have defense. But there's a weird thing about it, right? Like, you know, one person can only use so many guns at one time. To have that many guns where, and in the shooter's case, in the case of this most recent event, it's my understanding that the AR-15 that was used to slaughter these children was purchased within 2 weeks of the time. So I don't know. I take Paulina's point of view, and I want to kind of throw in a few things, being the Texas guy that's here. I think David Potus, do you have your hand up? Were you actually? Oh no, you're just wondering.
I was just playing with my light up here. Sorry about that.
No worries. Do you? What's your point of view from Monterrey, from Mexico?
So first of all, I think it's like you mentioned, really complicated to leave politics out of this. And from the other thing, I have a lot of friends from Texas and from other parts of the United States, and again, I'm hearing both sides of their what they're thinking and what their opinion is. And sometimes, me being from outside, there's a part of me that doesn't understand all the gun culture in the United States, and at the same time, a couple of friends of mine that live in Texas using Mexico as an example of, we need guns because you don't want to be like what happens in Mexico. I'm like, what are you talking about, right? I mean, I know. The news that travels faster, the news that spreads more is always the bad news. But I mean, I've been living here for all my life and never had the necessity or even thought of this would be a situation where I could have used a gun or could have needed a gun. I know there's violence. There's a lot of news about what's going on with the cartels, but that's one of the things that's very specific about that is that type of violence is really specific to certain parts of the country, really specific to certain situations, and that's the common reference you hear here in Mexico when comparing what happens in the U.S. and what happens here in Mexico is, for example, here in Mexico, you just know not to go to certain places in the city or the country and things like that. I mean, there's things I always envy about the U.S. For example, you can travel in the U.S. no matter the time, no matter the highway or traveling between cities. Here in Mexico, you have to take care about what hours you travel. You're not to travel at night, things like that. But other than that, when you're here in the city, and you just stay out of the violent parts of the city that every city has. I mean, certain degrees, certain levels, and whatever. You'll be okay. I mean, there's nothing to worry about. I mean, like I mentioned, I'm not worried. I mean, I just travel all around the city, and I'm not worried about getting assaulted, getting mugged, anything. I mean, I know I live near San Pedro, and one of the safest municipalities in all Latin America. But comparing to the U.S. and the feeling that we get here in Mexico, I mean, I'm very simplifying what I'm gonna say is that in the U.S. you just don't know when or where it's gonna happen. It's completely random. And you could be in a school, you could be at a supermarket, you could be at a shopping mall, and things like this happen. And again, when you do encounter something here in Mexico, 99% of the time, could be exaggerating, it's between two cartels or something like that, and they're in the dispute, something like that. It's not against the people. And the feeling that I got in the U.S. is that you could be at the target because the guy's just shooting around. That's one of the things that I mean, just comparing that. And as a solution, I mean, I don't know. It's a really complicated thing. Again, I don't want to push my opinion against. I know what it's very important for the U.S. in terms of your constitution and the Second Amendment. But the thing that strikes me more, and again, I don't know a lot. I don't have a lot of information. Is just the accessibility to buy a gun. I mean, that for me is the most shocking thing. That I mean, just this couple of months ago, I went to Texas with my family, and we went to I don't remember if it was Dick's Sporting Goods or Academy, and my kids were shocked. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. Really, literally shocked by how there was a section in that store where you could purchase guns. I mean, they were like, "Well, I mean, why are there guns here in the sports store?" and that is for hunting and things like that. But I mean, there were handguns and there were other types of guns, and they couldn't believe it. I mean, that's not something that it's that accessibility. I mean, here in Mexico, I couldn't tell you where you could go to purchase a gun. I mean, I just don't know. So that type of thing. Again, I don't know if I'm expressing myself. It's
I think you're doing a great job. I'm listening because it's interesting to think about how safe I feel when I'm in Mexico. And the funny thing about it is, I've spoken in 27 different cities in Mexico as an example. I've gone out into the streets really late at night, early in the morning, all sorts of different times, and there's a peacefulness that you can actually feel there that you wouldn't necessarily feel in I was assaulted in downtown Austin one time, and it just was random violence, in February 22nd, 2009, and just like there is something that I think Americans are blind to about how violent their society has become. And it's been interesting because I think it's so easy that we're being distracted from the real issue, and so which is allowing the situation of a do nothing. I mean, just more prayer, thoughts and prayers. The worst part about it yesterday was seeing Governor Abbott here in Texas having a little memorial time. But he didn't announce that he was going to actually take any action, right? When we look at Mexico and when we look at the diatribe that comes from him specifically about how bad Mexico is, when not looking at self, it's like it's one of the famous quotes might be, "Let he without sin cast the first stone," right? It's here Governor Abbott has been ragging on Mexico a lot in the last few years, and it really upsets me because I know Mexico to be the peaceful place that you're talking about. Yeah, there is violence, but it's not. It's I don't know. We're almost blind to what's happening in our own backyard. David Nichols and then John Gonzalez, or David Potas. If you had something else to say, it looked like you were about to say something.
Just a closing thing. Exactly. I mean, again. It's a feeling here in Mexico that who the bad guy is. I mean the cartels, the areas, the specific place, and that's it. I mean, there's a way to stay safe here in Mexico. I mean, I wish it wouldn't have to be like that, but there's the bad guys, and there are areas you just don't touch. But you know, it feels so, and again, simplifying a lot, it feels so random in the US. I mean, in the location, who the perpetrator is, and the victims. It's here you can explain if somebody gets killed here. I mean, there's always a quote unquote a reason, because you know he was a dealer, he was involved with something sketchy or something like that, and that's just the thing that I mean, me from the outside, I struggle to comprehend.
Understood, totally. David Nichols, you were saying a few things that you wanted to share, and then I'd like to hear from our New Zealand expert right after that. David, go ahead. David Nichols.
Yeah, sure. Basically, a lot of politics are driven by rural interests because of the way that our representative democracy works. You know, that you have, for example, in the Senate, we've got, 100 senators, 2 from each state. It means a sparsely populated state like Nebraska, a voter there has a lot more power than a voter from Texas, for example, even though Texans are obviously very much in favor of reducing gun control, which is why Abbott has got his finger on the pulse of what Texans want to hear, or the average voter wants to hear, I suppose. And so he's not going to do anything about it, because he's going to blame it on a mental health issue instead. But there's also a lot of there's this idea of like almost, it's getting worse, like the idea of social Darwinism, right? The people that are affected by these things, they don't look like the decision makers, more or less. It's racism. There's some of that in there for sure. If you look at Uvalde, it's mostly a Hispanic area. A lot of people, unfortunately, are going to look at that and say, hey, that can never happen to me. I don't care. And that's about one of the ugliest aspects of this, is people not feeling a connection to the victims, and then therefore not being motivated to take any action. And I for me, it's the hardest part to deal with, but I think we have to recognize what it is before you can try to change it. It's just my opinion.
But at the same time, I'm going to pose the question, how is it not relatable if there's children in every household all around the world? How is that not relatable? To me, I find it absurd. Literally, the one place, yes, you can look at Middle East and people might have a concern for safety because of not wanting for men to have children educated, but that's a different subject. But there's absolutely no room for anybody trying to justify while you're taking your kid to school to go grocery shopping, you have to be concerned that some dumbass isn't going to come in and start shooting everyone.
It's unjustifiable. It's not, but in my opinion, that is part of the problem. I'm not trying to justify it, Paulina, for sure. But look what happened in El Paso a few years back. After that, Texas passed the open carry law. Instead of strengthening gun control like they said they were going to do, the government, they made it easier to access guns. And those were kids that were killed even then. And the only way that I can personally, rationalize that is because the decision makers think, I don't care. It'll never happen to my kids. It'll never happen to my family. So let's make it easier to get access to guns. Because that's exactly what happened in Texas.
Yeah, what I want to do is we're going to hear from Emmanuel in Nigeria, and then we'll hop back over to John, who's got the perspective on New Zealand. It is quite interesting, the lack of action, or almost like there's something else at play. Actually, I have something I'll come back to in a little bit. Emmanuel, you can give us a perspective from Lagos, Nigeria. Thanks for joining us. What's your perspective? What did you want to say?
Okay, thanks very much, Kevin, and thanks for giving this platform. What I just want to say is it feels really sad seeing the things happening in the world. I would have said I see much of this in the country where I reside, where insecurity is very high, is a big problem. Recently, last week, there was for blasphemy, a lady was burnt. The law did nothing. They just keep on saying they would work. Last week, I reside in Lagos. There's a part of Lagos called Lekki. A group of bike riders, they stabbed someone and they burnt him. This is a city, right? So I'm speaking from my own perspective to say I feel pain that we lack humanity. We don't put humanity first when we are trying to solve these problems as well. Why is it is, from my own country, what I feel is the laws are there, right? But we are not really acting on that. Because if I look at Nigeria, for example, we have there are a lot of division. We see these differences instead of seeing what unites us together as people, which is the humanity, not race, not tribe, not skin color, whatever we say it, right? So except we have to shift this mindset and look at the beauty of why we are humans, it's going to be hard to solve these violence problems. It's the same thing we are experiencing in our country. Instead of to see that this is a Nigerian, they are seeing that this is a Northerner, this is a Southerner, right? And the problems lingers there because they have strong affinity for the tribe than for the nationhood, right? They don't have that mindset of putting the country first or putting humanity first. Rather, they put their religion first, they put the tribe first. And in doing that, they don't even care about taking a life, because at that point, humanity means nothing. But why is it this way? These are the core questions we need to ask. We might say first, there are policies there. And I feel from our country, corruption is not even the problem. Corruption is the solution. And I've gotten to, I venture into entrepreneurship to see that's the best tool we could use to solve problems like this. Because we need to ask the fundamental questions, like why are people doing what they do? Because if we can understand that, you will see that for me, it falls down to corruption, because people like I do. Innovation comes in now to get people busy, to give people means to solve some of all these problems. They could hire, because right now what they do is to hire corruption to achieve whatever they feel is burst. But when we can find a way to bring market creation innovation to a country like Nigeria, where you're having a lot of unemployment, for example, people cannot now focus on things they don't need to focus on. When the jobs, a lot of things, they are being distracted. And that way, this is the innovation that might come up. The judicial system could be strengthened to implement these policies. Right now, from my own perspective, I feel for my country as a case study, we don't have the capacity to implement these laws. And this person's perpetrating this, I know that fully well. But when we can empower our institutions to be able to implement these laws, I feel we can solve that problem. But how do we empower them? It takes a whole lot of money. If you feel you want to fight this thing, it's very difficult to fight. It's very difficult to fight. Fighting is not a sustainable solution. It can never be a sustainable solution. We have to go back to the fundamental. What is this? And I'll tell us that innovation. Create more markets, build more things. In a country like America, where it is a very transparent society, I think their judicial system is strong to a large extent compared to the big country like mine. So, in sum, what I would say, I've seen violence both from the.
Let me interrupt you just for a second, because you're cutting out just a little bit, but I want to make sure that we capture some of the things that you're saying. Just to echo it about what I heard, that people are putting tribe before the nation or humanity. That was one of the interesting points. We should be asking the question of why people are doing what they're doing. And then the recognition, and this is a really interesting recognition that it hits me. Fighting is not a sustainable solution. One of the things that's interesting about the United States is we have so much wealth that somehow gearing up and putting more weapons and more weapons and more weapons to the point that we have 40% of the world's guns it's not sustainable. And like one of the things that reminds me of is, right now there's a group of people who are saying that there should be police that are in the police that should be at each one of the schools. One of the weird things, by the way, I want to make sure I mention this, is supposedly the shooter engaged with a policeman before, or he engaged with security. I don't know why it's not been widely reported, but he engaged with security before he went in to kill people. He engaged with security. In fact, there's other schools where there was a security person, but the security person, protected themselves and didn't go in and take on the shooters. So I think that, this idea about, fighting and preparing for more fighting is not a sustainable solution. Thank you, Emmanuel, for the perspective. I want to hop back over. I mentioned that we had a Canadian that lives in the United States or lives in New York that knows a lot about New Zealand because of the work that he does. John, why don't you share your perspective?
Sure. Kia ora.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Firstly, my condolences to all the people that are affected by this. It's a deep tragedy. And I want to say that, firstly, I am not an expert. I just have lived in New Zealand for 8 years and I have done a lot of work there. And I think, I can only share from a personal anecdote of my own experience of living in New Zealand, which is a small country of about 4.9 million people. That part of the reason why some of these challenges, these problems can be easily solved, especially when they're of this magnitude, is because we are a small country. There's a saying in New Zealand that there's 2 degrees of separation. So it's likely that if I ask you if you know someone, they may not know them, but they may know someone who does know them. And I think it's this connection between people that keeps us in this mentality that we are all connected. And I think that's one of the, from my own personal perspective, having now spent a lot of time in the US, and also through the work that I do with working with community, is to rebuild these connections with each other. And I think for a large part, this disconnection that has been mentioned a few times, this feeling that things aren't relatable to me, is partly because of just the scale. And I think it goes back to even deeper into, personal values. And so I think in New Zealand in particular, we have this very strong mindset that we are all family, whānau, and that we are all connected, and that everything that we do has an impact. Now, there are other challenges and problems that we do have, like particularly in agriculture, but again, as well, the culture of New Zealand, guns isn't really a big thing unless you're a farmer, and so you're not really recreationally going out shooting guns. Like I'm living upstate New York right now, and there's firing ranges everywhere. I hear guns going off early morning. So it's not really part of the culture from what I've experienced personally. And so I don't want to infringe on anyone's beliefs around guns at all. I just know that in New Zealand in particular, it's not part of the fabric, and there's not a majority or a large population who really, have a liking to guns. And I've seen this across other small islands in the Polynesian area as well. In Hawaii, I spent 2 years living there as well. It's just not part of the social fabric. Whereas I think in the US, from what I've experienced, guns always seems to be a hot topic, which I tend to stay away from because it's a heated discussion. But I can only share from my perspective that, what I've seen at least is that there's this difference in mentality, in the values that have been instilled through, generations of the culture. So that's all I can share at this point. I don't know if that helps, but.
Well, I do think it's a good reflection, the connectivity among New Zealand, as you're saying on one part. The second part is that cultural frame. I know that, as an example, I grew up the son of a single mom, and my dad really wasn't involved in my life a lot of the time. And then I had uncles that would take me out hunting, so I learned how to, wield weapons, and I feel very comfortable with them just because of my. There were years that I had meat because there were, we killed deer that then became what I got to eat as a kid, and I probably wouldn't have gotten to eat meat, sorry to all my vegan friends out there. But so for me, it's actually interesting. As I reflect on it as a martial artist, for doing Aikido for the last 25 years and Japanese martial arts for the last 30, One of the things that I think is missing in the general access to guns is the discipline that you're supposed to, like, once as you, in martial arts, you learn to have more power. You're able to touch into something that's much more powerful as you learn how to do it. But then you also develop at the same time a deeper discipline, right? And I don't see that in part of this new gun culture that doesn't seem part of what John's pointing to. He's like the historical perspective of, me as a Texas kid growing up with uncles that took me hunting and taught me about weapons, and to this point that I don't think we should have a gunless society. That's where I stand about it. But there's the not having a discipline about this. Someone else said recently, and this was before Tuesday's happenings. Someone else said that there's another African proverb that says, "Until you initiate your boys, they will burn down the village." And I've been trying to figure out how to point to that. I got initiated because I had uncles around that they would be like, I have two uncles that really put me under their wing and saw that even though I had kind of this deficit in one way, that was there. The other thing I want to make sure I mention is about, because I saw some nut job kind of posts on Facebook recently about social programs. The other thing, in just outing myself about one of the reasons that, I have I said it this way on the Facebook post, I have the anger of the wolf. If you saw the movie that I'm referring to, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's about someone who can remind me the name of the movie. But I have the anger of the wolf, but I decided to be a sheepdog with it. And it's because I think I had support. There's the idea of there's the sheep, the wolf, and the sheepdog. And, what's the difference between the wolf and the sheepdog? They both have lots of rage and lots of anger, but one of them, cultivates the discipline around going deeper. The problem with handing a kid who's 18 years old an AR-15 with no discipline around that is, and making it easy where there's no time frame, is there's nothing that's there. The other thing I was surprised about social programs, that the person that I'm actually talking about was saying that all social programs are bad. I am a product of a social program in that, I got free lunches as a kid, and many of the meals I got to have growing up poor by U.S. standards, but many of the free lunches I had were actually paid by all of y'all, taxpayers. And it seems like that's partially what's been forgotten, that, if we're going to build a community, if we're going to build a society together, and we wonder about, what the question that, how do we actually get people thinking about society, or back to what Dr. Emmanuel was actually speaking about how to actually make it sustainable and all that sort of stuff. I think part of the reason we see such acting out in the United States is a lot of times there's not a lot of support for people. And so it's, screw it, I'm going to extract my chunk of violence on people is what happens. With this. I don't know. I know I see that there's a lot of chat. Usually when I have my mouth open, it's hard for me to keep up with the chat. So maybe someone would like to reflect on it really quick. David Nichols, David Potes, one of y'all. Yeah, David Nichols.
Yeah. Well,
please.
I was just saying that what you're saying there with a lack of support. I think it's a really strong, it's like social Darwinism. It's really strong in the United States. Survival of the fittest. It goes economically and socially, right? The U.S. is the richest country in the world that has the smallest social safety net. So I was thinking that maybe what I was proposing is, if we can't make gun control laws, maybe we can make very strong liability laws for the seller and the owner of the gun. Right? So yeah, there's no law restricting it, but if you do something, you're going to get absolutely hammered. Or if somebody does something to your gun, you're going to absolutely have consequences. And that's a very American thing of, ensuring that consequences are enforced if you do something you're not supposed to.
I think that's an interesting perspective. Someone was saying that you have to insure a car, and there's liabilities if you use the car in a bad way. Maybe there should be insurance on these high-end weapons, Like I think that that's an interesting perspective of doing things. I want to make sure I reiterate this idea that having social support, like if we really want to take on some of these issues, we have to have some type of social support. I know Jorge is actually saying a few things in the chat. Jorge, why don't you come off of mute, and instead of me reading your chats, why don't you actually say what you're talking about as well? Because I think it's an important perspective.
I'm really sad about what happened in Texas, and I know that it's scary, but we've known for years that in Mexico, the problem that we have with trafficking is not with drugs, it's with guns. If the traffickers don't have easy access to guns, they won't have the power, and we won't have the problem that we have now in Mexico. Just for a figure, according to the BBC, in 2019, 17,000 people were killed in Mexico by legally bought weapons in the US that were illegally trafficked to Mexico by the border. So there is a problem in the US, but that problem is so much bigger in Mexico, and I'm pretty sure that the same happens in Central America, in Brazil, and in other parts. So this right to buy guns by anyone is rippling all the region, not only in Texas. Anyway, it's really sorry what happened.
Thank you for your comments, Jorge. It's interesting. It's like it's interesting to see the perspectives that are being shared and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, at the end of a 1-hour program together, we're not going to get to the end of things. I think the main thing that I think is interesting is to look at how we can actually organize and do something. I really would like to use this as an excuse that as we reach out to a wider group of people in our community, since we're an action-focused community and we have so many excellent examples of how things are being solved, by all of y'all, right? You're taking on different issues in different parts, like everything from healthcare to sustainable living to dealing with opioid like there's all, I see that just from the people that are here in the studio audience. And so part of what I want to do is I want to make sure that if you see other ways that we can bring this up, that we can actually, open the door to other entrepreneurs, perhaps even nonprofits that are taking on this, I'd like to engage them in that. Over the next few weeks, we're going to have a number of programs that are going to be focused on helping each one of y'all, just be more productive and things like that. I had originally invited a congressman to actually be on this program today. He was not available at the time. I'm going to try to get him to come back because he has some interesting perspectives about what he would like to see happen. He's up and coming in the Texas House, the local Congress. And so we'll see what we can get perspective-wise here. Obviously, I went ahead and shared in the URL for the LinkedIn. We seem to be getting a lot of LinkedIn engagement for some of these conversations. We've had a little bit on today's already. And so part of the thing is let's use that as our point of engagement to see how we can reach out to other entrepreneurs, especially ones that are taking on these things. I want also to talk more about these social programs. And those of you all that have been touched by social programs, like as an example, there are days I would not have gotten to eat if I hadn't had the support of just being able to walk into the cafeteria. They pulled out that little card and they said, "Hey, Kevin, go ahead and get a meal," right? And I think that there are people that are dealing with that level of crisis, even in the United States, that we should look at. How is it that we could build these social safety networks, even if we can't figure out how to get the government to stop wasting so much money on what they do and solve these problems directly? At some point, I'll tell you what I think about Texas human health and human services and how much of a pain it is to engage with them and how they're wasting so much money versus taking that, being efficient with it and solving all the problems for all the people that are in Texas, right? It just doesn't make sense. That being said, I think it's time to take today for a wrap. And I knew that this was going to just like start to scratch the surface. And I always think that that sucks that we only scratch the surface, but we're going to scratch the surface on this and come back to it. I want to remind everyone that if you want to get involved, if you're here as a supporter, if you're here as a mentor aspect, we've been ramping up the number of country managers because we're taking this network and reaching out into other parts of the world. I just heard back from this morning from our new Romanian country manager, and yes, we're going to be building a venture bridge to Romania, which is pretty exciting. There's a bunch of other things. I will be hosting again the group from Uzbekistan this afternoon at 3 p.m. So we're continuing to build the network. Reminder of this is there's this whole way that we can solve local problems with global insight. And I think we're starting to see aspects of that here. And so let's keep on doing that. Sign up here if you get a chance for just closing up on such a tragic week of events. My condolences go out to the families. I am sorry that I don't personally know how to take even greater action with the resources that I've been given. I'm open to anyone's feedback about what we can do here. And, it is always an honor to be working with a group of entrepreneurs that are driven by vision and values. We have our work cut out in front of us. So let's go change the world for the better together. Thank you all for today.